Warning, if you fear the transmutation of humans into weapons, the beliefs of other religions, and/or sweaty hobos, this review may not be for you. Viewer discretion is advised. Okay, now that all the dysmorphic white-collar workers are gone, it's time we start this review. Humans have a natural-born curiosity about almost everything. When we are children, we wonder about the larger-than-life world surrounding us. As we get older, though, we find the answers to these seemingly trivial questions, and we begin to start asking questions that are much more pragmatic and/or theoretical in nature. Sometimes, despite all effort, we simply cannot find answers to these questions. Some examples of these questions are ones like, why are we here? What is our purpose? What lies beyond? Along with many other hypothetical and existential questions, which are too pretentious for me to go on listing here. Although some claim to have answers to these questions, we as humans seem to have a bit of trouble agreeing with their particular answers and explanations at times. A common place for people to turn in order to find answers to these questions is religion. For instance, religions can claim to have answers and explanations to some of these questions that we at times fail to find answers for. One very common question religions are asked is what happens after this life? And although there are many different answers to this question, the anime series I'll be talking about today would like to share its answer to this age-old question. So, today on Holden Reviews, I'll be reviewing Noragami, a 12-episode anime series directed by Koutarou Tamura, animated by Studio Bones and aired during the winter 2014 anime season. So, is this show the answer to our prayers or simply false hope? Join me as I guide you through the divine world of Noragami. When people are pushed to their absolute limits and realize that their tenuous grip on a feeling called hope will not be enough to help pull them through their hardships, some will cry, hoping anyone will hear their pleas. Little do they know that their pleas have been heard loud and clear, and for a mere 5 yen can receive solace in the form of divine intervention. Now, we are not talking divine intervention from the likes of deities such as Jesus, Buddha, Allah, etc. None of them. Rather, you'll find yourself face to face with a tracksuit-wearing minor deity with a bit of a perspiration problem named Yato, and he would love to solve your problems. All you need is 5 yen and let him take care of the rest. Yato, being a fairly unknown deity, finds himself in a bit of a financial impasse. You see, being a god, you rely on the offerings of your worshippers to allow you to live the life you wish. So it is a bit difficult to both get offerings from people when you're a god that they've never heard of, and on top of that, when you have no shrine in which to present said hypothetical offerings. So, Yato's goal is to raise enough money to make a shrine of his own. But at a steady rate of 5 yen per job, this could take much longer than expected. During one of his jobs to find a person's runaway cat, he crosses paths with a girl named Hiyori Ikki. She, unlike most people though, is able to see Yato, and when she notices that he's about to get hit by a truck, dives to save him but almost dies in the process. When she regains consciousness, Yato explains to her that she's in a state of existence between the living and the afterlife. This allows her to consciously and unconsciously exit her body in her soul form, allowing her to wander and see the world from a completely different point of view. A view containing strange, amorphous creatures that roam freely among the people of this earth, completely undetected. These creatures are called Ayakashi, and they are everywhere, from lurking in the shadows to soaring through the skies to even sitting on the shoulder of the person next to you. Ayakashi are formed through the negative emotions of people. Although some are fairly harmless, bearing no real threat, some are capable of possessing people and causing some real problems ranging from murder to suicide. Ayakashi are not invincible though, you just need the right tool for the takedown. In the case of gods, this tool is called a divine instrument. Divine instruments, although superficially just weapons, are actually uncorrupted spirits of those who have died and not yet passed on to the afterlife. By a twist of fate, Yato is able to find the uncorrupted spirit, which he then forms a pact with to make him the master of the spirit of this young boy named Yukine. Through this pact, Yato is able to transform Yukine into a divine instrument, his specific form being that of a hiltless katana that he names Seki. From there on, this group of 3 goes on to fight Ayakashi, make some new friends, and learn more about themselves, all while making 5 yen a job. While the series as a whole bears a lot of striking similarities between other anime in regards to its ideas and concepts, it is the conglomeration of said ideas that makes this series so refreshing to watch. It takes these concepts that you may have seen or experienced before and shines a new light on them, making them feel so refreshing. The most glaring issue with Noragami though is its lack of any centralized overarching narrative that the characters work towards. For instance, although yes, Yato has the dream and goal of becoming a popular and revered deity, such a goal is a very abstract endpoint since it is not only subjective, but it is also implied that such a feat may not even be possible, as is evident by the meager amount of money he makes per job. In contrast, Hiyori's goal is to be able to stop switching between her half Ayakashi form and her human one, which at the time she's incapable of controlling. By offering Yato 5 yen though, she's able to come to an agreement with him that he will fix this body abandoning problem that she has developed. This too though really isn't a goal that drives the series nor motivates the characters, making the whole agreement feel like just an exchange of dialogue rather than an event capable of progressing the plot. The show is as a result fairly episodic with only a few clearly defined arcs, each of which only span a few episodes. But to be honest, this was never really a problem for me. I honestly liked how the show almost felt transient, which I felt nicely reflected the lifestyle of Yato, due to him really being nothing more than a celestial hobo. This also results in the show being almost a slice of life at times rather than an action-adventure series, which I thought was a very interesting change of pace. There are a few details that really interest me pertaining to the world presented in Noragami. The biggest of those being how Yato and normal humans interact and/or their lack of interaction. For instance, how people interact with Yato fascinates me because he is capable of being seemingly invisible to people around him, but at the same time is capable of making his presence known and conversing with these people as if he was a mere mortal himself. This is demonstrated a number of times where he's right in front of these normal people doing things that would normally elicit a pretty certain reaction, but you don't see these people reacting to him because they cannot see him because he is invisible to them. On a similar note, I found the way that people who call upon his help and bear witness to him to react in a very unexpected way given the circumstances that they are in. This is illustrated by people being very informal and casual in the presence of a god, talking to him as if he was just another guy. Something that this story really neglected to touch base on was the status and role of gods in the society that was presented. I say this because if the world presented in Noragami is a world where interacting with gods is normal and everyone is aware of their presence, then their cavalier and nonchalant attitude towards these divine beings seems much more justified and believable. But if this world is meant to be a more realistic representation of Japan, I find it rather ironic due to the fact that modern-day Japan harbors a very high concentration of atheists. The largest limiting factor for this show is the simple fact that it doesn't have the amount of episodes to fully express and convey the world depicted in the manga. I'm not saying this is an unfaithful adaptation, however, because on the contrary, it is an almost perfect adaptation with only a few minor alterations, the biggest of which is the inclusion of the final antagonist, Rabo. But the series itself ends on a note that allows us to have more content added, which is exactly what will happen with Season 2 just on the horizon. As far as an anime to manga content ratio, the anime covered 4 volumes of the manga before it started deviating around the middle of chapter 12, meaning Studio Bones has 8 volumes of content that is still unadapted that can be used in Season 2, which, as I mentioned, has been greenlit already. Overall, the series pans out in a very understandable and reasonable fashion. I never really got upset with what the story became, but I wasn't really that impressed either, making story receive an average 5.57. The first of these characters that I would like to talk about is Ikki Hiyori, who is our female main protagonist. At the start of the series, she's just another junior high student who happens to keep her mixed martial arts watching hobbies on the down low. It is not until she crosses paths with Yato that she really begins to grow as a character due to all the events that transpire after she meets him. The events that arise from that point onward are often depicted through her point of view, since just as it is her first time being exposed to these events, it is also the audience's first time being exposed as well, making her the ideal vessel for the story to be told through. I feel that out of all of the main characters, she by far undergoes the least amount of development. The reason for this is because she never really gets the time to change and develop because she is constantly investigating and learning about the new world and the characters in it. I did like her and I thought that she was a good character, but simply lacked any real traits or development that would make her feel more fleshed out and human. The next character I want to talk about is Yato, the self-proclaimed delivery god, which is in reference to how he'll basically deliver himself to whomever asks of his assistance, with the promise of 5 yen of course. When we first meet Yato, he seems like a character whose cavalier and self-confident attitude are a product of his wisdom and how he's pretty much seen it all. And while some of these snap judgments are true, it is only when we realize that he's poor and struggling for cash that our perception of Yato changes. Yato is a god with dreams and illusions of grandeur, and whether those really are his sole motivating forces or maybe some hidden ones, Yato is still unbelievably dedicated to his job of helping people when they have no one else to turn to. Yato to me was the most interesting character for a number of reasons. I thought the way characters gave pieces of information about his dark past and constantly hinted at what he did, yet never explicitly explained his past actions, really left the viewers to often come to their own conclusions on whether they trust him or not. And I know at some points I really didn't trust Yato's choices, judgment, or just all-around personality. Something else I really liked was how Yato himself seemed to shift between different emotions as certain events happened. He could be smiling and laughing in one scene, but the very next time you see him, he'll be somber and reflective. It is really the emotions that Yato portrays that really made me like him as a character. You assume that since he's a god that he has all of the answers and limitless power, and it is only when you see Yato really struggling that you begin to see how he, just as everyone else, is not invincible. His ability to selflessly sacrifice his own body and well-being for the betterment of others was a trait that I really liked about him, albeit a rather cliché one. Learning more about Yato and watching him become friends and interact with all the other characters was for me truly the most rewarding aspect of this series. The final major character I want to talk about is Yukine, the spirit of a boy who by chance becomes Yato's divine instrument. We're never really told anything about Yukine's past for the simple reason that not even he can remember his past. All we know about Yukine are the actions we watch him take in the present, not the actions that he made in the past. It is almost as if his death was akin to a phoenix, in that now he is born again from the ashes, free to re-experience life. Or so he thinks. Some of the major conflicts in this series arise from the simple fact that Yukine was once human and by extension flawed. No teenager is without their fair share of problems, and Yukine is no different. He wishes for material possessions, he longs for a purpose, he yearns for the emotional and physical love of the opposite sex. He is undeniably human. Or at least, he once was. This afterlife that he now lives serves as a grim reminder of the life that he once lived, because it is only when he sees the daily lives of the people who can't see him that he realizes how much he misses being one of them. Despite all of this though, Yukine as a character went through some pretty major changes in development. I found my opinions of Yukine to be rather wavering throughout the series, starting off with me feeling pity for this boy who's lost everything and only wishes that he could have a second chance at living the life that he dreams of living. While later on in the series I found myself rather disliking him quite a bit due to his blatant disregard for the feelings and well-beings of others, and how he took what was once self-pity and turned it into blind hatred aimed at everyone around him, and especially Yato, whom he blamed for all of his suffering. It is Yato and Yukine's relationship and how it develops that is one of the most compelling aspects of this show. It is very reminiscent of a father and son in that the son detests and blames the father for all of his hardships due to the fact that the father is reprimanding the son so that he will learn the difference between what is morally right and what is morally wrong. It is Yukine's journey of accepting his situation that makes for one of the most satisfying payoffs that this show has to offer. The remaining supporting characters serve their purpose in the story and are enjoyable to watch as they interact with the main cast of characters, but there are a few things about the supporting characters that I felt were a bit unresolved. Some examples of this are when we are introduced to a character known as Nora, who we are led to believe has a long history with Yato, but we are never really shed any light on this past that they shared and are instead left in the dark. Another instance of this is with a god named Bishamon who wants nothing more than revenge on Yato. Bishamon seems like a character whose motives, while unclear, do seem unwarranted until we are given brief hints here and there as to what caused her animosity to blossom into just pure contempt. There's just a hindering sense of withheld information that we as the audience feel at times while watching this show. Now, this isn't necessarily a bad thing, as for it makes for a good deal of suspense and unpredictability when it comes to the interactions between certain characters. But the real root of this problem lies not in the characters nor what is portrayed and or conveyed, but rather the simple fact, which I must reiterate, which is that this is based off of source material that is much longer than what we've been given here in this small dose. With that said, I feel it is important to mention the anime exclusive ending, or rather the inclusion of a certain character that was not originally in the manga at all, making his inclusion and connections to the characters in the story feel rather overbearing and arbitrary. It didn't really put a damper on my experience as a whole, since by this point in the series I was already thoroughly invested in these characters, which made getting through this portion of the story much easier. To summarize, I feel that the characters of Noragami were for me one of the most redeeming factors that this show had to offer. They were great at conveying their emotions, and watching them interact with one another really made up for the fact that there was really no overarching story, because at the end of the day I was more than just fine watching these characters communicate and seeing the cause and effects that their actions had on one another. Characters receive a very good 7.45. Studio Bones is no stranger to the action genre, so it goes without saying that Noragami is one very good-looking show. It has some incredible action sequences that are very fluidly animated, while at the same time, the series as a whole bears a level of consistency across its drawings that really make it feel very in control and deliberate in terms of animation. It is important to mention though that even with the very well done animation, this show does recycle a few sequences multiple times. The biggest offender of this is whenever Yato is refining his blade, which is a sequence you see numerous times, sometimes multiple times in one episode. Although if it is replayed in the same episode, it is usually edited down so that you get what happened but are not explicitly forced to watch it once more. What I find interesting about this recycling of the footage though is how conscious the animation team was when they were doing it. I say this because there are multiple occasions in which they alter this scene for the sake of continuity with the previous shot. The characters never seem to go off model, even during scenes of high action, which is where most shows slip up due to the simple fact that you're able to get away with a lot more mediocre drawings when you realize the audience will only be seeing them for 1/12 of a second. The character animation in general is always very good and never really dips in quality. Even if the scene going on doesn't allow for the most robust and interesting animation to occur, I feel that it is the contrast between these fairly static scenes and the more dynamic action scenes that really heighten the sense of excitement we get whenever we are finally given an action scene. Since these aforementioned fantastically choreographed fight scenes don't really make up for the majority of this show, I think it is also important to just mention how well animated the rest of this show is as well. The backgrounds were very well done for the most part, with the only exceptions being the few times this show decided to use computer-generated backgrounds instead of the typically digitally painted ones. The backgrounds, although well done, can be fairly generic at times, but that is to be expected since Japan is a more than familiar setting in anime at this point. To build off of that though, I felt one thing that this series was sorely lacking was a sense of habitation. The world felt so barren and devoid of human life in many ways. We rarely see characters in the presence of bystanders, making some scenes feel as if the city itself had a mass exodus, and that the characters are merely staying in this shell of a city. I feel that this may be intentional though in order to better get across the isolation people like Yukine and Yato feel from being unable to live in the world that surrounds them. I think this also helps get across a more cold and chilling atmosphere, which is appropriate due to the fact that this series does take place in winter. The color palette for this anime also helped convey a sense of winter, with its colors being more on the cool side of the spectrum with primarily blues and neutral tones. The light and diffusion of lights as well as the shadows and how they are cast by certain characters are all very convincing and well done. I also feel that the tint that they put on characters so that they better blend with the environment does wonders, since it makes the characters feel as if they are actually being affected by their surroundings rather than just a layer on top of them. It is because of these effects that the characters look so good at some points, while at other points they seem very static and seem to be filled with solid colors, rather than any gradients which can be used to express how light reacts to these characters. While on the topic of characters, I would just like to say how much I loved the character designs. Although pre-existing due to the manga, I feel that Toshihiro Kawamoto did an amazing job with them, as he does with a lot of his designs. His most notable designs being his work on Cowboy Bebop, Mobile Suit Gundam 0083 Stardust Memory, as well as Mobile Suit Gundam 8th MS Team, and even Golden Boy, among a few others. I'm a really big fan of his work in general, and this show is no exception. I feel that the characters were all fairly good looking, regardless of gender, which at times can be rare in anime. The characters were also depicted doing rather funny and exaggerated actions at times, which really helped with the comedy of the series, since at times it didn't even need words to be said, since the timing and visuals were more than enough to get a chuckle out of me. This anime's visuals were handled with the utmost care, and it really shows that Bones cared a lot about making this show look good, leading to animation receiving an excellent 8.23. If the animation is the face of Noragami, then the sound definitely is the personality. The musical score composed by Taku Iwasaki, whose body of work is incredibly wide and diverse, this soundtrack is no different. He blends Asian melodies with Western electronica to create a sense of an old Oriental folktale, while the electronic portions of the soundtrack serve as a stark reminder that this series takes place in the modern day, despite how the themes of gods are deeply intertwined with Japanese history. For example, there are some songs on this soundtrack where you may be just hearing an electronic rhythm, and then all of a sudden a shakuhachi will be introduced, and with it bringing a very distinct quality that is very reminiscent of much more traditional Japanese music. In addition, the very same song can add a harp to it, only adding to its already very culturally diverse palette. This soundtrack is so diverse though that right after a song like that, it will go into a right-hand melody with a left-hand accompaniment piano piece that is just so eloquently done that it is hard to believe that the previous track was made by the very same composer. One thing I feel that this score did particularly well was establish an atmosphere of uncertainty. The music rarely gave any red herrings as to what was about to happen on screen, but instead when the show wanted to slow down and heighten and or accentuate a certain scene, it was capable of doing so without being overbearing and instead just added to the whole emotion on screen. The action scenes in this show were accompanied by a variety of electronic, synth dance beats, and even at times rap accompanying them, with the rapper on mic being the one and only Lotus Juice, who I personally really liked and felt that he just helped amp up the whole excitement and really got you excited for the action that was about to unfold. Something else I really want to talk about is the use of diegetic and or just out-of-place sound effects that were present on some of the tracks. While at times they can be used in a very humorous manner to help get across a silly situation, it is when the score gives you a much slower track that you can really appreciate the use of sound effects in the score. It makes the song itself feel like it's a part of the airspace that is being shown on screen. You hear the cries of sirens driving by in the night, and you really get a sense of what it must be like to be there. It is the soundtrack's conscious use of things like this that I really admire it for, because it feels like it was made with the intent of being experienced while the events on screen are taking place, rather than just some soundtracks which are composed with the sole intent of meeting a deadline or being handed to an animation studio so that they can haphazardly slap it onto their timeline, render it out, and call it a day. As a result of the diverse range in the soundtrack, the series is easily able to grab the most appropriate song to amplify the events transpiring on screen. Events ranging from the laid-back and sometimes goofy life Yato lives to something that is able to heighten the emotion and create an air of uncertainty around our characters. The musical score for this series is easily one of the most unique things about it and definitely gives it a distinct attitude, which I personally really enjoyed, causing Sound for Noragami to receive a very good 7.25. Noragami is a show that really took me by surprise. When going into it, I was expecting your typical run-of-the-mill shonen, but after watching just one episode, I knew I was dead wrong. Despite Noragami's rather lacking story, it was really the characters and their interactions that really saved the show for me. The amazing presentation in terms of both animation and soundtrack were really just icing on the already delicious cake that Studio Bones has cooked up this time. I found myself watching one episode and just having that become watching another and another until before I realized it was 3 in the morning and I was out of Noragami to watch. One lasting impression that Noragami left on me was the wide range of emotions it made me feel. It made me laugh at how funny it could be, it would make me feel uneasy about certain characters and events, and at times it would even make me feel sad and sympathy for the pain that some of these characters must have been going through. Noragami really was a very enjoyable ride, and it did leave me with some questions and ideas. For instance, a question pertaining to Yato that has perplexed me since his introduction is as follows. We as the audience are shown him writing his cell phone number on various things ranging from bathroom stalls to graffiti on walls, yet at no point do people pay attention to him. We are later given a reason as to why this happens, as he explains that he can be seen by people but only if he wants them to see him, as I mentioned earlier. So my question is then, do people see the effects that he has caused on the world surrounding him? We are given a brief mention about strong winds by Hiyori's mother, which are actually a direct cause of a fight involving Yato. But aside from that, no one really mentions Yato and his effects on the world. This was just a question I was thinking about during my viewing of this show. Something else this show made me think about was the very idea of how we humans view divine entities. I find it fascinating that regardless of your beliefs when it comes to divine beings, the very purpose of believing in them, or not for that matter, seems to usually be one and the same. It achieves peace of mind. It is a way of coming to terms with this world that we live in, be it finding comfort in believing in the cycle of reincarnation, the acceptance that this maybe is our one and only life that we will ever live, or additionally the belief that there's an afterlife following this one. I find the need for humans to achieve peace of mind in regards to their ultimate demise to be something extraordinary. At the end of the day though, it doesn't really matter what you believe comes after this life, whether you are born again or this is really the end. Because regardless of what happens then, we are guaranteed life here on Earth now. So no matter what happens after this, the one thing we'll never experience again are these exact days we are living here on Earth now. That is why humans strive to live out their lives to the fullest extent, because the last thing we want to be harboring at the end of our lives is any kind of regret that we could have lived them in a different way. This primordial desire to live such a life I find to be one of the most awe-inspiring and simply beautiful traits that we as humans bear. No matter how I look at it, life is something amazing, and no matter how hard it may get, and it will get hard, life is not something that we should fear, but rather rejoice for simply experiencing. Because at the end of the day, life is all we have. These are merely concepts that this show made me think about that I felt I would share with you. Noragami to me is a very special show. I enjoyed watching it from its very first episode to its very last. It made me think and feel many different things. It made me think about what it must be like to walk amongst the living while you yourself aren't. It made me smile and laugh with the characters, and it left me feeling with a sense of wanting more. And even if the sequel that awaits us doesn't live up to my expectations, I am still more than happy with the time that I spent with this little series, making my score for enjoyment a fairly high 7.75, leaving me awarding Noragami a final score of 7.25 and a stamp of Holden approves. So that is all for my review of Noragami. I hope you enjoyed and thank you so much for watching. I'm Holden from Holden Reviews, and until next time, sayonara, see you later.